Elena arrived early, as she always did. It was a habit forged in the bones of someone who had never had the luxury of being late. People like her, the invisible ones in uniforms and worn shoes, didn't get the benefit of doubt. They had to show up, stay silent, and leave no trace except a gleaming floor or a spotless mirror. That night was no different, or so she thought. She entered through the service entrance at the back of the building. It was a stark contrast to the glittering facade out front, where luxury sedans lined the curb, drivers idling with the smooth patience of the rich. Behind the building, the light was colder, more functional. Her shoes made no sound on the concrete floor of the narrow hallway as she slipped into the staff locker room to tie her apron and pull her dark hair into a tight bun. Her uniform was plain: black pants, a white collared shirt, and non-slip shoes. She didn't need anything more. Nobody ever looked directly at her anyway. She pushed her mop cart out into the venue just before the party began. She kept to the shadows, as instructed, staying out of the photos and the paths of guests who floated through the gilded space like royalty. And in many ways, they were. The chandeliers dripped with crystal. The floors gleamed like wet marble under the warm golden light. The scent of orchids, citrus, and something soft and expensive filled the air, diffused from hidden machines in the vents. Waiters in sharp tuxedos glided past her carrying delicate hors d'oeuvres, oysters on glass trays, bite-sized lamb skewers, and caviar on silver spoons. Elena took her position near the far corner of the main ballroom. She would be stationed there for the night, watching the floor, ensuring that no spilled drink or broken glass became an issue. She liked this part of the job. It gave her time to observe people, not in a longing way, but in a curious one. She wasn't envious of the gowns or the jewelry. She didn't fantasize about being one of them, but she watched them the way you might study birds at a feeder, beautiful, distant, and fleeting. The guests arrived in a cascade of glamour. Dresses trailed behind women like waves. Men laughed too loudly, glasses clinked, and small talk filled the air in a rhythmic hum. Elena caught snippets as she wiped down a handrail or polished a mirror. Investments, art auctions, private chefs, ski trips to places she couldn't pronounce. She was scrubbing a faint smudge from the base of a column when she noticed someone stop nearby. She assumed it was a guest pausing to check their phone or just a cufflink. She didn't look up right away. Her focus was on the floor. Then, she heard a voice. "You're early," the man said. She looked up, startled. A tall man in a deep navy suit stood in front of her. He held a wine glass delicately by the stem, and his expression was one of pleasant surprise, as though he had just bumped into an old friend. "I'm sorry," she replied, blinking. "I thought you were part of the VIP guest list," he said, smiling now. "You've got that look." She furrowed her brow and instinctively pulled off her glove, as if that would clarify something. "I'm with the cleaning staff." The man paused. Something flickered across his face. Was it embarrassment, confusion? But then he laughed softly, not mockingly, just surprised. "Well," he said, "you wear the role with more poise than most of the actual VIPs I've met." She didn't know what to say. Compliments weren't something she was used to receiving, especially not from men in designer suits, especially not while she held a damp rag and crouched near the baseboard of a luxury ballroom. "I didn't mean to interrupt," he added quickly, his tone respectful. "You just stood out to you, maybe," she said, glancing down. "To anyone paying attention," he replied. She stood, placing the rag in the bucket and stepping back. "I don't think your friends would want you chatting with the help." "Then it's a good thing I'm not worried about what they think," he said. She didn't know how to respond to that. Most people either ignored her entirely or talked around her. This man seemed not only interested in her, but a broken bar intrigued. That was unfamiliar territory. He extended his hand. "I'm Marcus, by the way." She hesitated. Her hand was rough from cleaning chemicals and years of labor, but she shook his hand anyway. "Elena." "Elena," he repeated, as if testing the feel of it. "Beautiful name." She offered a polite smile, already feeling the need to excuse herself. "I should get back to work." "Of course," he said, "but let me ask you something." She tilted her head, cautious. "If you were a guest here tonight, what would you be doing right now?" She blinked, thrown off by the question. "I wouldn't be here. People like me don't get invited to places like this." He nodded thoughtfully, as if he hadn't considered that before. "Shame. This place could use more people like you." Before she could formulate a response, one of the event coordinators appeared beside them, eyes wide. "There you are," the woman said to Elena, looking flustered. "Mr. Levington has asked that you join him at his table." Elena turned sharply. "What?" The woman gestured toward Marcus. "You're his guest?" "No," Elena said immediately. "I think there's been a mistake." But Marcus was already stepping in. "Not a mistake," he said. "She's with me." "I don't think that's allowed," Elena said under her breath, her heart suddenly pounding. "I just made a rather large donation," Marcus whispered back, eyes twinkling. "I think they'll allow it." The coordinator, overhearing, offered a tight but forced smile. "Right this way, ma'am." Elena's feet felt heavy, like they belonged to someone else. She looked down at her uniform, then at Marcus. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Because I'd like to have dinner with someone real," he said, "not another person pretending to matter." So she followed. She wasn't sure why. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the way he spoke to her like she belonged. Maybe, for just a moment, she wanted to see what it felt like. Her seat was right next to his, facing the stage. The table was dressed in fine linens, the plates rimmed with gold. Conversation swirled around her, polite and practiced. No one questioned her presence, though a few cast curious glances her way. She sat still, hands folded in her lap, trying not to breathe too loudly. Marcus leaned in. "You okay?" "I'm waiting to wake up," she whispered. He laughed gently. "Don't, just be here." The meal arrived, tiny courses plated like artwork. She tried to eat slowly, to savor, but she could barely taste anything. Her senses were too alert, too aware of every glance, every sparkle of crystal. Yet no one said a word. They accepted her because Marcus had accepted her. At one point, a woman in a red gown turned to Elena and asked where she was from. "Brooklyn," she said simply. The woman smiled. "Oh, my husband's from there. Gentrifying fast, isn't it?" Elena didn't reply. She didn't have to. Marcus redirected the conversation before it could veer into awkwardness. He knew what he was doing. The rest of the evening passed like a dream. Speeches were given, funds were raised, people clapped, music swelled, and through it all, Elena sat there like a ghost turned visible. Not because she had changed, but because someone had looked at her and chosen not to look away. When the event began to wind down, she stood and thanked Marcus. "You don't have to go yet," he said. "I do," she replied. "My shift starts again in 10 minutes. He paused, then smiled. "You've got a strange kind of grace, Elena. You ever need anything, advice, work, someone to talk to, find me." She didn't ask how. She didn't ask if he meant it. She just nodded. And then, without fanfare, she returned to her mop and bucket. The room had changed. Or maybe she had. She scrubbed the same floors, wiped the same handrails, emptied the same bins. But her hands didn't feel as tired. Her back didn't ache quite the same way. Because something had shifted. Not in her job. In her. For once, she wasn't invisible. And even if it only lasted one night, it was enough to remind her that sometimes, the world sees you before you see yourself. And that changes everything. Certainly. Here is an expanded version of part 2 in approximately 2,000 human-style words, written as a flowing narrative with immersive detail and no headings, just as you requested. Elena didn't expect to see him again. She thought the night had been a beautiful mistake. A fleeting moment of being seen that would vanish as quickly as it arrived. Back in her apartment, surrounded by peeling paint and the steady hum of an old refrigerator, she stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Her face was tired, framed by wisps of hair that had escaped her bun. But her eyes looked different. She couldn't name it, but something had shifted. The following morning she returned to work, just another number on the schedule. The mop was still there. The card still creaked when she pushed it down the hallway. No one mentioned the previous night. No one brought up Marcus. She didn't either. She filed it away like a dream she didn't dare replay too often for fear it might disappear. But then it happened. 3 days later, she had just finished cleaning the mirrored wall in a private lounge when her supervisor came bustling down the hallway with a look that could melt glass. "You," he barked, waving a paper in the air. "Someone's asking for you." Elena blinked, confused. "Who?" "Don't play dumb. Some guy, real important, says he wants to talk to you." He left a card. Her heart picked up speed. She took the card. Heavy, thick, with embossed gold letters, Marcus Levington. Beneath his name was a handwritten note. "If you're free for coffee, I'd like to hear more of what you didn't say that night." She stared at it for what felt like an hour. Her supervisor walked away muttering, probably assuming the worst. She pocketed the card, unsure of what to think. That night she didn't sleep. She lay awake wondering why he reached out. Did he feel sorry for her? Was he trying to make some kind of statement about social class? Or was it something else, something genuine? She didn't know what to believe. But she also knew she couldn't let fear make the choice for her. She'd done that her entire life. So the next day, after her shift ended, she took a shower in the locker room, changed into her best jeans and a clean blouse, and made her way to the cafe. The copyright he had written on the back of the card. It was tucked into a quiet street in Soho, with exposed brick walls and soft jazz playing through ceiling speakers. When she walked in, she half expected to be turned away, but instead, there he was already seated, wearing a soft gray sweater and dark jeans, his phone face down on the table. He looked up and smiled as if she were exactly who he'd been waiting for. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said as she sat across from him. "I wasn't sure either," she replied. He ordered her a cappuccino, and they talked. At first, it was awkward. She wasn't used to being the center of attention in a room that didn't require her to serve or clean. She kept glancing at her hands, unsure what to do with them. But Marcus had a way of making people feel comfortable, not by performing, but by listening. He didn't ask her about her job. He asked her about her thoughts, her upbringing, her dreams, if she had any left. And she told him things she hadn't told anyone in years. She told him how her father used to say that every housekeeper was just a locked door away from the life she deserved. She told him how her mother died cleaning other people's houses, her spine curved from years of banding. She told him how she once dreamed of opening her own business, a small cleaning service that paid fair wages and treated workers with dignity. But somewhere along the way, life got heavy, and the dream faded under bills and obligations. Marcus didn't interrupt. He didn't pity her. He just listened. And when she finished, there was silence between them. But not an empty one. It was full, heavy with mutual understanding. "That night," he said finally, "you didn't look like you were cleaning. You looked like you were studying the room, observing it." "I always do," she said. "It helps to know who might spill something next." He smiled at that. "You have more awareness than most of the CEOs I've met." She wasn't sure if he was serious or just being kind, but there was no mockery in his voice. It startled her. Over the next few weeks, they kept meeting, always in public places, always by her choice. Sometimes it was coffee. Once it was a walk through Central Park where they talked about their childhoods, hers in a Brooklyn apartment with 3 siblings, his in an Upper East Side penthouse with a nanny and a father who treated affection like a rare currency. He confessed he envied her resilience. She said she envied his options. "You think I had options," he said one day, "but I was born into a box. It was just a nicer one." Bit by bit, a strange friendship formed, one that shouldn't have existed. Not between a cleaning woman and a millionaire. Not between a woman who washed dishes by hand and a man who'd never owned fewer than 5 credit cards. But still, it grew. There were moments she felt out of place. When he invited her to an art gallery opening and she wore the only dress she owned that didn't have bleach stains, she caught the eyes of women scanning her from head to toe, trying to classify her. They couldn't, and that unsettled them. But Marcus never wavered. When people asked who she was, he never flinched. "Elena," he would say. she's with me. It made her uncomfortable at first. She didn't want to be with anyone. She wanted to be herself. But Marcus never treated her like a possession. He never showed her off. He simply included her, like it was the most natural thing in the world. One night, over dinner, she asked him the question that had been haunting her. Why me? He looked at her for a long time before answering. Because you make me think. Because you don't pretend. Everyone else plays roles. You don't. And I needed that. It wasn't a romantic declaration. It was something deeper. A recognition. A mutual understanding that they were both, in some way, outliers in their own worlds. Eventually, she stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. She stopped expecting him to disappear, or for some cruel joke to reveal itself. He wasn't perfect. He talked too much when nervous, and sometimes forgot that not everyone had the safety net of millions. But he cared, genuinely, and he saw her in a way that wasn't about sympathy or fascination. He saw her potential. Then came the day he asked her the question she wasn't ready for. Why haven't you started that business? She stared at him. You mean the cleaning service? Yes, I don't have the money. You don't need much to start, he said, and I know people who'd hire you just based on your standards alone. She shook her head. It's not that simple. I'm not saying it is, but what if it's not as hard as you've been led to believe? She didn't answer, because deep down, she had no excuse, not anymore. That night, she went home and pulled out a notebook she hadn't opened in years. Inside were scribbled notes from when she once dreamed of starting a business. She flipped through the pages, ideas for names, sketches of uniforms, policies on fair treatment. It felt like visiting an old version of herself, a one she had almost buried. The next day, she called in sick. She spent the entire afternoon creating a plan. By the time the sun set, she had drafted a basic proposal and written a list of 10 potential clients. It was small, messy, unpolished, but it was real. Marcus didn't front her. He didn't swoop in like some fairy tale prince. He simply encouraged her. He introduced her to one of his contacts who needed someone trustworthy to clean a downtown loft. That first job led to another, and another. Within 6 months, Elena had 3 employees, a woman just like her, hard-working and overlooked. Within a year, she had a waiting list. She still mopped floors from time to time, not because she had to, but because she wanted her hands to remember what built it all. She didn't stop being Elena. She didn't start dressing in designer clothes or speaking in rehearsed phrases. She kept her Brooklyn accent. She kept her blunt honesty. She kept herself. And Marcus, he remained her friend, a rare one. They never dated, never crossed that line. It didn't need to be that. What they shared was something better than romance. It was real. Elena never forgot that it all started with a mistake. A man thinking she was someone she wasn't. But the real miracle wasn't the misunderstanding. It was what happened after he discovered who she really was and still chose to sit beside her anyway.